Last month my channel was deleted without any explanation. It stripped me of both my income and my voice. But I didn't panic. I connected with others who went through the same, recorded everything on camera, and exposed the platform's injustice. Now, people have started to listen to us. My channel vanished overnight. They took my voice, my pay, and every comment I ever loved. So I built a revenge that made them listen. It started like a small personal wound. Last month my channel was removed without explanation. A cold, automated email, a link to policy, no human on the other end. One moment there were playlists, subscriber milestones, the quiet hum of notifications. The next, nothing. The platform erased years of late nights, careful edits, and conversations with strangers who become friends. It wasn't just an account, it was income that paid the rent, a studio that paid for itself, a place where I learned to be braver. The first feeling was disbelief, then anger, then the hollow panic of losing a voice mid-sentence. I tried the usual channels, appeals that vanished into a bureaucratic black hole, form letters that rephrased their policies without addressing me. At every turn the reply was the same, not eligible. Violation. Final. They gave me no specifics, only a verdict. That was when revenge stopped being about me. Seeing the same pattern in the comments, in DMs from other creators who had been tossed aside with identical templated language, I realized this was systemic. It was a machine that swallowed creators whole and produced no accountability. They weren't just removing content. They were removing livelihoods and silencing dissent in the one place where many of us had finally found an audience. The sting of being singled out turned into a wider outrage. If my channel's deletion felt like a personal execution, the pattern felt like an epidemic of injustice. What I wanted, at first selfishly, was my channel back. What I wanted next was the truth to be seen. I wanted to make the platform uncomfortable. I wanted accountability. The plan was simple in its moral spine but elaborate in its execution. Expose the pattern, mobilize those who had been wronged, and make the platform answer in public where silence would be costly. No lawsuits were filed in the first week. I knew legal fights are slow and often private. Instead I decided to weaponize visibility, the very currency they'd taken from me. If they had taken my channel, I would use other channels. My revenge wouldn't be sabotage or threats. It would be clarity, narrative, and attention. Step 1. Document everything. I dug into my backups, pulled every saved draft, every public post, every timestamp. I recorded the appeal emails verbatim, took screenshots of the automated responses, and archived the AOPS, the comment threads where other creators described nearly identical fates. I made sure there was a paper trail. Truths are harder to deny when they sit in a stack of screenshots with metadata intact. I started connecting the dots, dates of removals, similarities in language, patterns in what was flagged. I organized it all like an investigator building a case. Logs, timelines, corroborating witnesses. Step 2. Build a chorus. Within 48 hours I found 3 other creators whose channels had vanished in the same week. We weren't competitors anymore. We were comrades with an identical scar. We shared notes late into the night, our calls punctuated by the low hum of frustration and the brittle humor of people who've lost something precious. One of them had a small podcast. Another ran a newsletter with a loyal readership. We agreed on a simple ethic. No doxing, no threats, no illegal maneuvers. Our weapon would be story and scale. We would present our cases to the public precisely and clearly, so that when we spoke, we would be undeniably credible. Step 3. Craft the narrative. I filmed myself speaking to the camera in the sort of unadorned way that works on platforms. Eye contact, steady breath, a short hook. I told my story plainly. What happened, when it happened, and how the platform's responses had been evasive. Then I intercut those confessions with the evidence. Timestamps, appeal screenshots, and short clips from archived videos that proved my identity and my style. I invited the others to do the same. We pooled footage. The montage became a mosaic of hurt and resilience. Creator after creator saying the same words with slightly different accents, the same machine-sounding replies overlaid like a villain's leitmotif. The result was cinematic without being melodramatic. Honest people telling honest stories, laid out so even a busy viewer could follow. Step 4. Mobilize allies. Recruit journalists who cared about tech accountability. Reach out to creator coalitions. Message consumer rights forums. I wrote a short, pointed press release and sent it alongside a dossier of our evidence. Most replies were radio silence at first, but one independent reporter, the kind who loves a David versus Goliath story, bit. His piece ran, and suddenly we were no longer 3 anonymous creators. We were a sign of a trend. The platform, for its part, sent the same scripted statement about community standards and safety. The kind of corporate language that parrots empathy while saying nothing. That only made our next move clearer. Escalate the optics. Step 5. Orchestrate a public reveal. We planned a live stream, not on the platform that deleted us, of course, but on a distributed patchwork of services. The live stream was promoted across social media, email lists, and message boards. We made a trailer, short and stingy, the kind that works in the age of infinite scroll. One-line hooks, a clip of my deleted content now reborn as archival proof, flashes of the automated emails, and the date. We timed it for prime viewing hours. The goal was to create a focal point, a moment when enough people would be watching that the platform could no longer ignore us without reputational cost. I remember the night before the stream, the tense quiet that comes before something big. We double-checked the evidence, rehearsed the spoken parts, and made contingency plans in case the platform tried to preempt us. We kept the plan legal and clean. Our aim was not to ruin anyone. It was to expose a process that wronged creators without explanation. We wanted dialogue, not destruction. The day of the reveal arrived like a storm. The livestream began with a simple slide, why our channels were removed. Then we went through the timeline of my channel's deletion. My last upload, the sudden strike, the email, and the unstoppable silence. Each segment was paired with corroborating materials. The chat filled rapidly. Supporters, skeptics, and journalists. People began sharing their own stories in the chat in real time. What I had feared, that we were a small, angry echo, evaporated. Instead, we found resonance. Viewers who had once been passive became witnesses. The platform's PR team posted their usual bland reassurance elsewhere, but the news cycle was now a chorus and they had to respond to the noise. Throughout the reveal, I used dramatic pauses like punctuation, a breath, a cut to black, a slide with only the words, no explanation. The pauses let the weight of the facts sink in. I leaned into irony at key moments, reading the platform's "We value creators" line aloud while showing the actual email that had gutted my livelihood, and the contrast landed with a quiet thud. That irony was part of the revenge, holding up the mirror and letting their own words betray them. We ended the stream with a call to action. Sign our petition, share your story, support the creators affected. We didn't ask for revenge in the violent sense. We asked for redress, transparency, and a seat at the table where decisions were made. We wanted the platform to explain how automated moderation decisions were reached and how to appeal with a human voice. The response was immediate and messy. Trending tags, thousands of shares, and messages from creators who had been afraid to speak up. For the first time since the deletion, I felt heard. The aftermath was shape-shifting. Overnight, the conversation became harder for the platform to ignore. Journalists dug deeper, creators added their voices, and viewers, the consumers, began to ask whether convenience had trumped fairness. The platform's stock response became a headline and a liability. They issued a longer statement, promised a review, and tellingly, opened a new appeal channel for cases like ours. I'm not naive. Corporations promise change and often deliver incremental adjustments. But public accountability is a lever, and we had pulled it. So that was my revenge. I turned erasure into amplification. I weaponized evidence and narrative, built alliances, and forced a giant to explain itself in public. I did not break in, sabotage, or slander. I documented, organized, and amplified. The irony of it all, that a company built on creators could be moved only when creators turned the spotlight back on them, was delicious. And now, after months of noise, there are consequences that ripple. Policy tweaks, new appeals routes, and a small but meaningful conversation about transparency. My channel. Still in limbo, but the story is no longer mine alone. The removal that was meant to silence me became the spark that lit a collective demand for fairness. This is not a Hollywood finale. It's an ongoing reckoning. My boss at the platform thought I would disappear quietly, but instead, I became the loudest voice they couldn't shut down. After the first live stream, the energy was electric. Messages poured in, from strangers, from creators with half-forgotten channels, from viewers who said, "I never knew this happened." Our evidence thread trended on social media, and for a few nights, the conversation couldn't be buried under the usual flood of entertainment. That was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. The platform still stood there, a monolith, shrugging in corporate silence. Sure, they had issued a polished statement about reaffirming their commitment to the creator community, but anyone who read it could smell the hollow air. It was damage control, not dialogue. My revenge plan had drawn blood, but the beast was still breathing calmly. So I decided to dig deeper. Revenge at this scale couldn't just be about a single live stream. If we wanted real change, we had to expose the systemic rot. Not just my case, but the machinery behind it. And here's where the story takes a sharper turn. First, I built a database. It sounds boring, I know, but imagine a map of injustice, each dot a deleted channel, each one with a timestamp, a genre, a story. I opened a simple online form. Were you banned or deleted without explanation? Tell us everything. Within a week, we had over 300 submissions. By the second week, over 1,000. Some were heartbreaking. Teachers who lost entire libraries of educational content, musicians whose original songs vanished overnight, single parents who relied on ad revenue to pay rent. Reading through their stories was like wading through a mass grave of digital voices. My anger deepened, because the pattern wasn't random. I noticed clusters. Music channels hit around the same time. Independent news channels cut down right after covering controversial topics. Channels from smaller countries disproportionately flagged. This wasn't random algorithm errors. This was policy wielded carelessly, and maybe even selectively. That realization changed everything. This wasn't just incompetence, it was negligence bordering on cruelty. The database became our weapon. Instead of anecdotes, we had statistics. We could say, this isn't just me, or a few unlucky people. This is systemic. Numbers carry weight. Numbers make journalists perk up. Numbers make corporations nervous. Meanwhile, I kept pushing the narrative online. I made shorter, sharper videos, each under 2 minutes, built for virality. One showed a timeline of creators banned in the same week, flashes of their content, and the identical emails they received. Another spliced the platform's glossy promo ads, "We empower creators," with shots of our evidence. I spoke directly into the camera. Do these stories look like empowerment to you? The irony hit hard. The clips spread fast, partly because they were emotional, but also because they were funny in a dark way. People love irony when it punches upward. That was step 2 of revenge. Turn tragedy into spectacle. Not cheap spectacle, but a kind that forced the audience to look at the absurdity of power. I knew that once the narrative stuck in people's heads, the platform couldn't just ignore us. But of course, the platform tried. Within days, they quietly reached out to some of the bigger names in our coalition, offering vague promises. "We'll review your case internally." A few creators, desperate to get their work back, considered accepting. I can't blame them. Losing a channel is like losing a limb. But I knew the trap. If we let them fix a few isolated cases quietly, the bigger problem would remain hidden. They'd silence the noise by throwing scraps to a few lucky ones. So I argued, persuaded, even begged my fellow creators, don't settle for crumbs. Make them change the bakery. To keep morale high, I staged something theatrical, the Wall of the Silenced. It was a digital mosaic built from the profile pictures of every deleted channel in our database. Thousands of tiny squares forming a massive, almost haunting image, a blank mouth, screaming silently. We plastered it across social media, let anyone download it, made it a banner of our movement. Suddenly, this wasn't just my revenge. It was a collective symbol. When you saw that wall, you didn't see statistics. You saw faces, stories, lives disrupted. Journalists picked it up. One headline read, "The Wall of the Silenced. Creators fight back against platform's black box moderation." That piece alone forced the platform's PR department to respond with more than their usual template. They insisted they valued transparency and were working on improvements. But again, no details, no accountability. Their words sounded weaker every time they repeated them. By this point, my revenge was no longer just emotional satisfaction. It was strategic warfare. Every move I made was designed to corner them. I didn't just want them embarrassed. I wanted them to face a choice: change their policies or drown in their hypocrisy. And then came the turning point. One of our allies, a journalist with connections inside the company, leaked something extraordinary: an internal memo. The memo outlined how the platform's automated moderation was knowingly overzealous, and how staff were instructed to let most appeals die unanswered because manual reviews were too costly. That line hit like a bomb. Too costly. As if livelihoods were just inconvenient expenses. The leak changed everything. Now we weren't just angry creators. We were whistleblowers armed with corporate confessions. We released the memo publicly during another livestream, reading it aloud line by line, letting the audience feel the contempt in those words. The chat exploded. Thousands of viewers, hashtags trending again, journalists quoting us in real time. My heart was pounding. This was the climax of exposure. We had proof of what we suspected, that they had chosen profit over people. That night, I didn't sleep. My inbox was flooded. Creators, fans, even a few employees thanking us quietly. I felt both powerful and terrified. Revenge this big doesn't just shake the giant, it makes the giant look back at you. And I knew they were looking now. The consequences. We were just about to find out. But one thing was clear. My revenge had grown far beyond me. I wasn't just fighting for my deleted channel anymore. I was holding a mirror up to an empire, and the reflection wasn't pretty. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you risk poking the beast with leaked evidence, or would you step back after the first victory? Is it smarter to settle, or to push until the walls crack? They thought a deletion would be the final page in my story, but it became the index of a book they never wanted read. Hook, the camera opens tight on my face. I say, they erased me, and then they pretended it never happened. The line hits in 3 seconds and the audience leans in. Backstory. When my channel vanished, it felt like someone pulled the plug on a life I'd built piece by piece. Notifications that used to arrive like small presents stopped. The comments that once made long nights worth it became unreachable memories. It wasn't just vanity metrics. It was rent money, collaborators' trust, and a public that had learned to expect my voice. The automated email that said, "Final decision," read like a judge's hammer. I filed appeals that bounced back as templated form letters. At first I wanted only one thing: restoration. But when messages arrived from others with identical template replies, from teachers and musicians and independent journalists whose archives were gone, the sting of my own loss widened into indignation. This was no one-off error. It felt systemic. Development. Revenge, I decided, would be methodical. The plan had 3 strands: assemble incontrovertible evidence, craft a narrative that could not be patronized away, and amplify in places the platform could not fully control. I built a database of submissions, deleted channels, timestamps, the exact text of emails, short excerpts of archived content. Each entry was a bead on a string. Numbers lend gravity. Once we had patterns, clusters by genre, spikes tied to controversial coverage, disproportionate removals of small country creators, journalists stopped treating our claims as isolated anecdotes. We rehearsed how to present the data. Visual motifs became weapons. The empty channel page, the repetitive policy phrase in bold, the comment threads frozen mid-conversation. Those images paired with simple narration cut through skepticism. There were quiet, tactical moves too. We drafted modular short clips under 2 minutes designed for rapid sharing. We prepared a press packet with an executive summary and raw files for reporters. We opened secure channels for whistleblowers to share internal screenshots safely. We debated ethics fiercely: what to publish, how to protect sources, and when to redact. The moral backbone mattered. Our goal was accountability, not chaos. That restraint increased our credibility. Climax. The move that changed everything was timing. We coordinated a staggered release to hit during corporate hours and financial news cycles. A dossier drop, a 2-hour live stream, and a compact documentary cut for social feeds, all within a day. The documentary stitched together testimonials, leaked internal guidance showing a preference for cost-saving automation, and expert commentary explaining how classifiers produce false positives at dangerous rates. During the live stream, I read the memo aloud, line by line, letting the corporate phrasing land with the weight of profanity in its indifference. Chat boxes filled with disbelief and fury. Hashtags trended. Journalists who had earlier been lukewarm now called to ask for interviews. Sponsor managers sent private notes asking for clarification. The memo's phrase, "manual reviews too costly," echoed beyond the screen into op-eds and broadcast segments. The platform's usual template replies suddenly looked hollow against a backdrop of leaked strategy and eyewitness accounts. Finale. The immediate effects weren't cinematic. We didn't topple the company overnight, and my channel did not magically reappear. What changed was structural. The platform announced pilot programs for human review, an upgraded appeal portal, and the commissioning of an independent audit of certain moderation practices. Those moves were partial and packaged with careful corporate language, but they were visible and measurable. More profoundly, employees started speaking publicly. A handful resigned with statements about burnout and ethical unease. Independent engineers released analyses confirming high false positive rates. The story stopped being only ours and became a mixed chorus of creators, insiders, and technologists. The wall of the silenced we had built shifted from symbolic art into a pressure point. The narrative no longer fit comfortably into the company's PR script. That friction was the revenge, not destruction, but exposure that forced the giant to change process under pressure. There were costs. Public movements attract trolls, opportunists, and misinterpretation. We had to police our message tightly, publish our methodology, and submit to journalistic scrutiny to maintain trust. We refused to chase cheap outrage. We relied on verifiable facts and careful storytelling. The work exhausted us, late nights, hard conversations with collaborators, and the persistent ache of seeing your livelihood in limbo. Yet each incremental policy correction, each restored channel, each public admission of error felt like a small, tangible victory. Revenge, in the end, had become an accountability project. I remember nights staring at that blank page like a wound that could not be ignored. Lawyers urged slow, private remedies. We chose speed with ethical controls. We redacted sensitive items, protected sources, and published only what we could corroborate. That restraint made our case harder to dismiss. Little wins compounded, a moderator's admission, an engineer's analysis, influential creators amplifying our wall, and insiders began to corroborate the pattern. Armed with specific demands, publish an appeals dashboard, disclose automated moderation error rates, commission independent audits, we made it easy for the public to ask for concrete change. The platform rolled out pilots and a better appeals flow. Not full justice, but movement. So I'll ask you plainly, if your voice were taken tomorrow, would you use the speed of public attention to reclaim it, or trust the slow machinery of law and process? Is public shaming a legitimate tool when institutions choose opacity over accountability? I'm sorry, you're right. Here's part 4 rewritten as a single continuous block of English text, keeping the same dramatic and ironic tone and including hook, backstory, development, climax, finale, and the interactive question at the end. They thought they could bury the story under polished PR, but the more they spoke, the deeper they dug their own grave. That 3-second hook landed like a thrown stone and set the tempo. My audience leaned in instantly, eyes locked. The backstory behind that line is simple but heavy. After the memo leak and the initial live streams, the platform deployed its familiar defense. A sleek corporate video full of smiling faces and jargon about supporting creators, uploaded with careful timing to try to quiet the storm. It was emblematic of the corporate reflex I knew too well. Publish a polished piece of PR, wait for the outrage to die down, then resume business as usual. The problem for them was that their propaganda collided with our evidence. Every time their ad played, people responded with screenshots of the leaked memo and replies listing channels that had been removed that week. The contrast was so stark it became a meme, and memetics is a language corporations are terrible at controlling. That backstory set the stakes. PR couldn't just smooth over systemic negligence, and the company's attempt to calibrate optics rather than policy made them look small and cynical. So we escalated, not with chaos, but with coordination and craftsmanship. We built what I called the Echo Machine, a campaign of synchronized, surgical amplification designed to use the platform's own reach against it. Dozens of creators, from micro-influencers to established names, agreed to post personal testimonials at the exact same hour, each one short, sharp, and ending with the wall of the silenced, our mosaic of erased faces. The logic was simple. A single voice could be dismissed as an outlier. An orchestra of voices hitting the same cadence at once becomes a phenomenon. We prepared for blockades by creating mirror uploads, distributing torrents, staging backups across less monopolized services, and seeding the materials to independent journalists in advance. A data scientist in our coalition turned our database into weaponized visuals, clean infographics showing disproportionate takedowns by category and geography, and a small legal advisory group helped us frame demands that were specific and achievable. Publish appeals metrics, disclose automated moderation error rates, and commission an independent audit. All the components were modular, designed to be rearranged and redeployed rapidly, keeping the campaign nimble and hard to suppress. The day we launched the Echo Machine felt like a digital earthquake. At 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, videos dropped in waves. Some direct and angry, others methodical and forensic, some heartbreakingly intimate. People who had lost years of work spoke without theatrics about bank notices, sleepless nights, and the cold finality of a final decision email. The wall of the silenced appeared at the end of each clip like a badge of collective injury, and viewers began to recognize that this was not a single grievance but an ecosystem-wide problem. Within hours the hashtag trended internationally, journalists pivoted from curiosity to coverage, and mainstream outlets began asking hard questions. The platform reacted predictably at first: demonetizations, temporary video removals, and the same boilerplate apologies. But suppression only amplified the signal. Every removal was captured, uploaded, and distributed so widely that suppression attempts became proof of the problem. Someone in our network remixed the platform's own corporate promo, splicing in the memo's most damning line, "Manual reviews too costly," at the end in blunt white text, and that edit spread faster than anything they could take down because it was uploaded by thousands of accounts simultaneously. The spectacle forced them into a visible defensive posture. Emergency town halls, hastily convened creator Q&As, and a PR narrative shift from bland empathy to "we hear you." The climax of this chapter wasn't a single explosive moment but the accumulation of irrefutable pressure. Leaked internal conversations, employees posting anonymous testimonies about burnout and ethical concerns, engineers publishing analyses that confirmed our error rate suspicions, and a spate of op-eds by respected technologists that framed automated moderation as an industry problem, not merely a product glitch. That chorus shifted the public conversation from one of isolated misfortune to systemic accountability. The company's repetitive assurances began to sound performative in the face of leaks and data. The immediate practical outcomes were imperfect but real. They launched a pilot for increased human review in certain categories, rolled out a more transparent appeals portal, and pledged to cooperate with an independent audit. Some channels were restored, though many remained in limbo. Internally, the company quieted some of its more punitive practices and opened limited lines of communication with creator representatives. The long game, however, is what mattered. We turned a company's opacity into a public governance problem that investors, regulators, and the press could scrutinize. There were costs and collateral damage. Trolls and opportunists latched onto the movement, forcing us to police our narrative, verify every claim, and redouble source protection. Some creators took settlements or quiet reinstatements and left the coalition, fracturing solidarity at times. The psychological toll was heavy. Sleepless calls, the fear of legal pushback, and the daily churn of defensive messaging. Still, the revenge I had sought, justice as exposure rather than ruin, had shifted from a personal vendetta to a broader accountability movement. The giant had not fallen, but it had been forced to show its seams. For the first time it publicly acknowledged the human cost of a system optimized for scale over fairness. The wall of the silenced, once a symbolic mosaic, became a reference point in discussions with policymakers and a visual shorthand in news segments about moderation harms. My channel remained deleted, a wound that didn't fully close, but the scene had changed. Creators now had clearer routes to appeal, journalists had data and sources, and public pressure lingered like a new law of gravity. If revenge is sweet, This sweetness was tempered by responsibility. Not to tear down, but to demand repair. So I'll end this part with a question I always throw at my viewers. If your channel was erased tomorrow and a giant refused to explain why, would you join the chorus and make the empire uncomfortable, or would you retreat, rebuild in private, and let the system stand unchallenged? Do you believe public exposure is a fair and effective form of revenge? They deleted my channel thinking they'd silence me, but in the end, they amplified me louder than ever before. That was the final hook, sharp and dramatic, the kind of opening line that makes viewers freeze mid-scroll. It's ironic, isn't it? What began as one channel's quiet erasure turned into a storm that even the platform's billions couldn't smother. The backstory of this last act is heavy with consequence. By the time months had passed, the Echo Machine campaign had carved itself into digital history. Our synchronized releases, our database, our leaks, and our wall of the silenced had all forced the platform into the spotlight. They rolled out token improvements, human review pilots, updated appeal forms, softer PR language. But the deeper wound remained. They had shown the world that profit, not fairness, drove their decisions. The whistleblowers confirmed what we already knew. For creators like me, restoration was still uncertain. My channel stayed dark, my archive still hidden. But something bigger had awakened. The realization that revenge had evolved beyond me, that it was no longer about one person's account but about collective dignity. The development of our final phase wasn't about gathering more evidence. We had mountains of that. It was about choosing what to do with the momentum we had built. Would we let it fade into just another viral protest? Or could we institutionalize it into something permanent? The coalition debated for weeks. Some argued for a legal strategy, some for union-like representation, others for alternative platforms entirely. My heart wanted fire, continued exposure, louder campaigns, more spectacles, but my head whispered that true revenge isn't just noise. True revenge is permanence. True revenge is creating something that makes your enemy irrelevant. So we decided to build. We turned the coalition into a formal network, the Creator Accountability Alliance. It wasn't fancy at first, a mailing list, a shared server, a set of clear demands. But soon, it grew into a hub, a resource bank, a repository of testimonies, and a legal advisory pool. Volunteers coded tools that automatically archived creator content outside the platform, ensuring nobody could be erased without backup again. We launched a public dashboard tracking takedowns and appeals, making the platform's hidden actions suddenly transparent. What they had concealed for years was now visible to anyone with a browser. It was, in essence, turning their silence into our data. The climax of this revenge saga came not in a single viral moment, but in an accumulation of pressure that reached the boardroom. Investors, the people who only cared about quarterly growth, began asking questions. News cycles framed the company as hostile to its own users. Regulators sniffed opportunity. And in one televised hearing, a lawmaker held up a printout of our wall of the silenced and asked the company's CEO, on record, "Do you consider these creators disposable?" That moment, more than any leaked memo or viral video, was the taste of victory. Revenge had escaped the confines of the internet and walked into the halls of power. But revenge, like fire, is unpredictable. Some consequences we hadn't intended. Opportunists tried to hijack the movement with conspiracy theories. Troll farms used our slogans for unrelated agendas. We fought to keep our message clear: transparency, fairness, accountability. No politics, no hidden motives. Just creators demanding dignity. It was exhausting, policing narrative drift, issuing clarifications, reminding the world that this began with human stories, not ideology. And yet, that was part of the lesson. True revenge demands discipline, not just fury. The finale of my personal story? My original channel remains gone. The platform offered me a private reinstatement, carefully phrased as a gesture of goodwill, but I declined. Accepting would have meant closing the book and letting them bury the broader struggle under the rug of my individual victory. I chose to remain erased, to let my absence speak louder than any reinstatement. Instead, I built a new presence on multiple platforms, diversified, harder to kill. My audience followed, stronger than before, galvanized by the honesty of the fight. Ironically, The very company that silenced me made me more famous, more trusted, and more independent than I had ever been. That was the sweetest revenge of all, to thrive outside their control. And so here I stand, not with a neat Hollywood ending but with a permanent scar that turned into a weapon. The platform continues, still massive, still imperfect. But it is no longer untouchable. Journalists cite our campaign when writing about algorithmic harms. Lawmakers reference our database in policy debates. Creators whisper less and demand more. The wall of the silenced remains online, growing each month as both a warning and a rallying point. And me. I sleep knowing that my voice, once deleted, multiplied instead of vanished. So now I turn to you, my viewers. If you lost everything overnight, your channel, your income, your voice, would you accept their quiet reinstatement, pocket your small victory, and move on? Or would you, like me, reject the crumbs and build something that makes your silence impossible? Tell me, is true revenge about getting back what was stolen, or about making the thief wish they'd never crossed you in the first place?